In the summer of 2004, Steve Jobs had announced to his team that he had undergone surgery and was now recovering from the operation that had removed a cancerous tumor from his pancreas. The tone of the message seemed optimistic, stating that the cancer that had been removed was a somewhat tame variation of a much more serious kind of cancer, and that he was already on the road to recovery, with the hope to be back at work in September of that same year. With his health on an upwards trajectory and access to the best doctors on the planet, this bout with cancer, while admittedly a frightening incident, seemed to be destined to be a footnote in the series of remarkable events that was Steve Jobs' life. Until it wasn't.
Apple informed the world its 56-year-old founder had died.
Apple is confirming that Steve Jobs has passed away after a battle with pancreatic cancer.
Death of a man who literally changed the way we live our lives every day.
Apple co-founder, chief wizard, and former CEO Steve Jobs has died at age 56. The cause of death not yet known, though of course he had been battling against cancer for years.
But why did this happen? Everything seemed to be headed in the right direction, so what were the events that led to his unfortunate death? Let's take a look at cancer first. If we take the US for example, 50% of all men and a third of all women will be diagnosed with some form of cancer in their lives. If we expand that data to include the entire world's population, 1 out of every 6 people who die, one of them dies from some form of cancer, which is a really high probability for such a serious illness. Cancer by definition is a group of diseases that involves abnormal cell growth, with the potential to forcefully invade or spread to different parts of the body, which in kind of a messed up simplistic way is an overabundance of life, which can kill you. When a cancerous tumor is in its infancy, it's usually developing in one place, or in other words, having localized growth. In many of these localized cases, doctors will simply go in and cut or excise the tumor out of the area and remove it from the body. But with a lot of cancers, you can't really do that. These abnormal cells can grow quickly and out of control and become regional, or even spread to other parts of the body, becoming distant or metastatic cancers. Now, there are over 200 different types of cancer varieties, each expressing their own version of physiological horrors onto the body. These 200 types can be sorted into 5 main groups, depending on what cell the cancer originates from. But out of the 200 plus flavors of horrible cancer, which one did Steve Jobs have? Steve wound up with pancreatic cancer, which is a fairly rare disease, with about 44,000 new cases diagnosed in the US each year, and a lifetime risk of getting it sitting at a little over 1%. Think of the pancreas as 2 different organs, which means 2 distinct kinds of tissue, resulting in 2 very different types of cancer. The most common kind of pancreatic cancer, which affects 95% of these patients, will have a variety known as adenocarcinoma, which originates in what is known as the exocrine portion of the pancreas. This is the main mass of the organ, which makes digestive enzymes that then get shuttled to the GI tract through specialized ducts. Cancer is already a horrible disease, but even within the space of cancer, the pancreatic variety that we're talking about is extra horrible. If you're someone who catches the disease quickly and the tumor is localized, your 5-year relative survival rate sits at a whopping 44%, which seems astronomical when you compare it to a distant pancreatic cancer diagnosis, which carries a meager 3% survival rate in 5 years. But wait, Steve didn't have this variety of cancer. I mean, yes, he did have cancer, and yes, it was pancreatic cancer, but it was a different kind of pancreatic cancer that actually didn't have such a bleak future. Jobs had a form of pancreatic cancer known as pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor, which only makes up a small fraction of pancreatic cancer sufferers. With the neuroendocrine tumor variety, cancer develops on little regions of the pancreas, specifically in the endocrine pancreas cells or islet cells. These islet cells are little clusters of endocrine tissue that create hormones that are destined for the bloodstream, and unlike their incredibly grim exocrine cancer brother, this one has a rather optimistic 5-year survival rate, with localized cases reaching 95%. Dr. Leonard Saltz, who was the acting chief of GI Oncology Service at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, said that survival for many years or even decades with endocrine cancer is not surprising, and that for the version that Steve Jobs had, survival is measured in years, as opposed to pancreatic cancer, which is measured in months. But as quickly as the good news started to settle in, bad news also follows. Instead of dealing with the cancer via the usual surgical methods, he opted to go for a more unconventional combination of treatment options, including things like psychic visits, vegan food choices, acupuncture sessions, and bowl cleansings, all of which went into his personal psychology of not wanting his body to be opened, as he didn't wish to be violated in that way. And, as expected of the cancer's uncontrolled cell proliferation, it continued to grow and grow until Jobs ultimately decided on surgery back in 2004, which is what the email to his team at Apple was addressing. Despite the reassurances from Jobs himself, rumors spiked in 2006 when he appeared at Apple's annual Worldwide Developers Conference, looking noticeably thinner than his usual self. This change in physical stature continued into 2007 and 2008, where he continued to display a considerably skinnier frame, with Apple addressing any medical concerns to Steve as having some hormone imbalances and catching a common bug. This public reassurance continued into 2009 when he took a medical leave of absence, stating that his health-related issues were more complex than he had originally thought. In 2011, due to his persistent health complications from the unaddressed issues with his pancreas, Steve Jobs officially stepped down as CEO of Apple, stating that, "If there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know." Even at this stage, his insistence on having things done his way was evident, as it was reported that he went through 67 nurses before he settled on 3 that he deemed acceptable for his medical care. But by October of that year, it was already too late. Because the cancer had developed too much and proper preventative measures weren't done at the appropriate time, Steve Jobs unfortunately passed away from respiratory arrest, which was a direct result from the pancreatic cancer diagnosis. It'd be speculation to say if Steve Jobs would have survived his cancer diagnosis if he hadn't waited for those 9 months before opting for surgery, but doctors say that this delay is what ultimately sealed his fate. One integrative medicine expert said that he had the only kind of pancreatic cancer that is treatable and curable. He essentially committed suicide. So, I guess we'll never know.